Hey guys, welcome to Revive Rebuild Garage. Today I'm doing a video on, I guess, kind of how to diagnose basically a snowblower that won't start. I say that, but this can apply to basically any internal combustion engine, like to a certain extent, right? Lawnmowers, snowblowers, generators, pressure washers, anything like that, right? Vehicles to an extent. I mean, obviously, like, they're a little more complicated than this is going to be, clearly, but yeah, pretty much any internal combustion engine. I'm not a mechanic. I've said that many times. I'm not a mechanic, but this is like, I know a thing or two about a thing or three, right? So this is basically how I diagnose everything when I get it, whether or not I get a backstory with it or not. A guy dropped this off and basically just said it wouldn't start. Ran a few years ago and now it won't start. So I have a rough idea what I think's wrong with it, but I'll just go through the general steps here and show you guys what I do pretty much every single time that I have something that I'm going to work on, and how I diagnose it and kind of get down to the root of the problem and what's actually causing it. So let's get into it. First things first, before we go pulling on this thing or seeing if it's going to start or not or anything, usually you should check the oil, see if there's any oil in it, because if it does fire up and there's no oil in it, that could be catastrophic. This one does have oil in it, and it actually doesn't look too bad. Smells good. I usually smell it to see if there's if it smells like gasoline, then you know it's been washed down. Basically, somebody's been trying to start it like 1,000 times and it just wouldn't start. Your crankcase ends up full of gasoline, right? This one actually, it's got good consistency, doesn't really smell like gasoline. It looks pretty clean, actually looks pretty good. So that's a good sign. So there's a few components that we basically need here for this engine to run. Oh, this marker's no good. So those are basically the four basic things, right? Spark, fuel, compression, and timing. So I'm just going to go through and make sure it has each one of them. Having said that about compression and timing, kind of difficult to check on one of these. I mean, like, we're just going to naturally assume that the timing is correct. We'll see when we go to fire it up. And compression, I don't know. This one's a Briggs & Stratton. I don't really work on them a whole lot. I generally work on the Tecumseh snowblowers, and they're actually very difficult to check compression on, because when you put a compression tester on them, when you actually pull them over, the intake valve, I believe, opens in between to relieve some compression, actually, so you can pull it over. It's kind of like a decompression. I believe it's the intake, could be the exhaust, but I'm pretty sure it's the intake. But anyways, it opens momentarily during the rotation to ease in basically a decompression. So when you go to put a compression tester on, they usually only end up being like 60 PSI or 65, 70, something like that, which that's not enough for an engine to run on. Usually you gotta be like, 100 plus for it to be pretty good. So it can be kind of confusing, because I've heard that before. Guys will do a compression test on like just a regular whatever horizontal shaft Tecumseh engine, and they're like, oh, it's only got like 60 PSI compression, thing's cooked, right? Well, really it's not. It's because that momentary valve opening to allow for decompression, and that's why it seems low, right? But anyways, you can usually tell, like, if these things are cooked, you can pretty much tell. If they just roll over and it's like, you know, you're pulling on it and there's like almost no resistance, they basically got no compression. So we'll kind of go through that as we're looking at this anyways, but those are the 4 pretty well basic things. And you can apply this, like I said, to pretty much any internal combustion engine to an extent, right? Don't get me wrong, something that's really super complicated with fuel injection and stuff like that, like that's a little bit different. But anyways, this yard equipment and stuff like that, this is pretty much all you need right here. So we will see about this. So most snowblowers I've ever seen always have some sort of a key system on them. Even the old Tecumsehs and stuff like that. They're just kind of like a quick disconnect safety feature. So this one actually doesn't have, this guy's just got the 2 keys, the one that goes in the machine and then the one that's a spare sitting right here on the handle. So there's nothing in this machine right now for a key. I physically have to put that key in there. If that key doesn't, if this key is not in here, you'll never have spark on this anyway. So I got to put it in first and then we'll check. All right, so this one's an overhead valve engine. I've had a couple of these apart that are similar. The newer Powermore ones are very similar to this. So I already know that the spark plug's underneath this cover. I just got to peel this cover off quick. Then we can check and see if it has spark. It's always the first thing I do. Like if an engine, it's usually the easiest thing to check because your spark plugs are generally easily accessible on most equipment. It's the easiest thing to check. And if you don't have spark, doesn't matter what you do, you'll never get this thing running. You'll never get any piece of equipment running if it doesn't have spark. So I'll just pull this cover off quick here. And like I said, I don't work on, this is like a newer style Briggs & Stratton. I've worked on the ancient ones, but this is very similar to like those Powermore ones that are on, I've seen them on like a lot of MTD stuff like Troy built, Boland's, and there's probably a few more I'm forgetting, but these chokes just pull right off the top. That little plastic choke lever just pulls right off the top. There's a plastic piece that connects to the carb. You can just pull that right off, no bolt, no nothing. All right, so here's this cover. This one's a 2-piece. So short of like pulling the primer off and all this wiring and everything, I can actually see the plug right down in there. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. The plug's right down inside. So I'm just gonna leave this wiring and primer line and everything hooked up for now because it's just easier for me. It's literally all I want to do is see if this thing has spark while I'm pulling it over. So I get my freaking hand in here. All right. This one might be kind of difficult to see because it's down in there pretty good. But another thing I usually do is kind of look at these plugs too when I pull them out just to see that, you know, what it was maybe running like before. Usually give you a good indication on what went on if it's something that you know nothing about or you don't get a backstory with it, right? One of those situations where it ran until it didn't. So this one actually looks pretty good. Maybe running just a touch rich, but it's actually not bad. Seen worse. Ideally they should be tan, right? But that's not far off tan really. So, here's the thing. When you're checking for spark, that spark plug has to be grounded on something that's metal on the engine. Whether it be the cylinder head or a cover or whichever. But like, if I just hang it out here in thin air, you won't have spark. It needs to be grounded. That's the whole purpose of it, right? That's where the circuit is actually complete, when the spark plug is grounded on the engine, and that's where you get your spark from. So this thing here is plastic, this cover, so I'm gonna see if I can kind of, you guys probably won't be able to see this, but I'll like tip it inside here so I can see it when I'm pulling it over. I'll see if I can show you here, but has to be on metal though, has to be metal that's grounded to the engine with the spark plug in the cap. The spark plug has to be fully seated in the cap and on an actual metal ground, like on the engine, a cover on the engine or something that's actually grounded to the engine block and or the frame, or else you will never get spark. Alright, so I'm just worried about right now just pulling it over to see if there's spark. So okay, this key's in, that plug's on this cover, which is metal, it's bolted to the block, so it should be good to go. Alright, this has spark. I'll show you guys if you can see here. Okay, that has good blue spark too. So if you have a spark plug that does, like, you can see spark, but it's like, you know, white or kind of off blue or something like that, and it's kind of intermittent, probably a good idea to change the plug rate at that time, especially if it looks bad too. That one looks pretty good and it's got good consistent blue spark, so we know that one's good. All right, so there's our first issue, right? So we know we have spark, so that's not the problem why this thing won't start. So I'm gonna put this plug back in. Actually, well, what I'll do here, it's kind of, this is weird for me because I don't normally video this stuff when I'm doing it. I kind of whatever, but anyways. So for the other two things here, or sorry, three things: fuel, compression, and timing. Basically, we're gonna assume it has compression and timing because, I mean, actually, you know what? Let's check the compression on this, just for laughs here. Let's see what it actually has, because I'm kind of interested to see. Because I know I've compression tested those Tecumsehs before, and they end up somewhere like 70 or below. And that's because they have an actual momentary the intake valve opens momentarily while you're rotating the engine for decompression. So it means you end up losing some of it when you're pulling it over, so that's why they're not like 100 plus PSI even if they're any good. Come on, you bugger. That's weird. This one doesn't even have a throttle on it. That's odd. Anyways, when you're doing a compression test, you gotta have your throttle wide open so you can actually allow for air to come through. So basically all I'm doing right here, I'm just jamming a screwdriver in here so this throttle is going to be open. Full bore. And if not, you won't get a proper reading. See if this screwdriver works. Alright. So I'm going to pull on this here now. So we'll hold that throttle wide open. So same thing, right? This obviously has some sort of decompression in it too, because it's only like 70 PSI. You guys can see if I can hold this straight. Yeah, it's only like 65 or 70 PSI. So obviously these are the same as the Tecumseh style snowblower engines, where it obviously has some sort of momentary opening of one of the valves to allow for a decompression when you're pulling it over. So anyways, like I said, we're just going to make the assumption it has good compression. And as far as the timing, unless something catastrophic happened, generally these things are within time, or unless somebody's taken it apart, messed around with the camshaft, something like that. Yeah. Or we got like a bent push rod or something like that, or whichever, right? Or dropped one. But anyways, all right, so here comes the part where probably a lot of people are going to disagree with me, and that's fine. I don't really care. Like, I've done this to literally hundreds of pieces of equipment, and I know bad things can happen, but like, I mean, you gotta have a little bit of common sense too. So basically what I'm going to do right now is just take carb cleaner, spray it in the cylinder, pull it over and see what happens. If it fires up, then I'm going to make the natural assumption that it's not getting fuel, because that's really the only thing that we're missing right now, right? Right? So yeah, like I said, a lot of people are going to disagree with me, and whatever, that's fine too. But like, I literally have done this hundreds of times and never had one issue. Not saying that I never will, but I just never have, and I don't worry about it too much, and I just carry on doing it. So anyways, here we go. If I can find some carb cleaner. I usually use carb cleaner, brake cleaner will work, anything that's flammable basically. But here's the thing, don't put like half a can in, right? Like, that's just silliness. A couple of small squirts, literally just to get it to fire. Like, it's not gonna run for 5 minutes anyways. It's literally gonna burn whatever I sprayed in the cylinder and then die anyways if it's not getting fuel, right? So a couple small squirts, and then basically if it fires up, then we've pretty much figured out that that's our issue, right? It's not getting fuel because it has everything else that it needs to run. So this one's kind of a little more difficult because it's way down in there, but okay. Put this plug back in. That is a ways in there. It's kind of hard to deal with. Whenever you're putting a spark plug back into, thread it back in by hand. Don't start it with a ratchet. See that? I'm threading that back in right now with just 2 fingers. Should go in nice and easy. If it's going in hard, you've cross-threaded or something. Don't ever start it with a ratchet, because I'll tell you, you cross-thread a spark plug, whew, you just turned a 2-minute job into like about 4 hours. So You gotta be really careful. All these heads on these things are aluminum, and the spark plugs are steel, so if you cross thread them, they'll go in, or they'll just absolutely destroy the threads on that head and they won't work properly because they won't seal. I can't get this darn thing in here. Come on. All right. Okay, put spark plug cap back on. Everything's in place. I got my key, so I have spark. Everything's on, good to go. We'll see what happens here. So like I said, all that did and all it's gonna do is just, well, if it's a fuel issue, right? If it's not sucking fuel from the carburetor or anything like that, right? All it's gonna do is burn that small little bit that you put in the cylinder, right? And that's why you don't put half a can in, because that's not gonna end well for you, trust me. And even if it does, well, you'll end up maybe hydrolocking it or something too, right? But anyways, yeah, a couple small squirts. See how it fired right up? It sounded fine, so we're gonna naturally assume that the timing is good, right? Like I said. Now we know that it's a fuel delivery issue, which I probably should have showed you guys to begin with, but yeah, it's gotta be because there's fuel in it. And it does not appear to have a fuel shutoff, so it has to be a fuel delivery issue, kind of which I figured. I'll let you guys in here so you can see. Yeah, see, it's got fuel in it. More than enough to make it run, that's for sure. And I don't see, there's no fuel shut off on it anywhere that I can see. And it would be accessible, they wouldn't have it underneath the cover, so. So yeah, fuel delivery issue. So obviously something is clogged in this carburetor, or could be the needle could be stuck, maybe there's no fuel in it at all, bad fuel, various different issues could be possible here. But anyways, those are just, I just wanted to show you guys the kind of my diagnostics when I get something that won't start, right? Kind of the checklist that I go through. I mean, obviously, this is a very, very simple one, right? They can be obviously a lot more complicated than what this one is. I kind of had a rough idea that this is exactly what this one was going to be anyways, but so now I'm going to take this carb off and see what it looks like inside. These, this is like my first step usually always. I just bought these. These are actually pretty cool. I've never had a set of these before. But this is basically all I'm going to do here. You can see this one doesn't have a fuel shut off. So all I'm doing is clamping that fuel line. If you don't clamp this fuel line with something, and you don't have to have these. I just bought a set of these. I never had a set before, but these are pretty cool. You can use vice grips, like pretty much, I don't know, anything that'll clamp and hold itself together. Set of these surgical scissors, clamps, whatever you want to call them. Anything just to hold this fuel line pinched, because as soon as I pull this fuel line off this carb, it's going to leak all the fuel that's in this tank, because this one doesn't have a shut off. But if you have a shut off, just turn your fuel off and then it won't be leaking out of here when you take this carb off. So I'm just gonna pull this cover off now. So I'm just pulling this primer line right off the carb. I'm gonna leave it hooked to this cover if I can get the darn thing off. There we go. Pull my wires off for my key. Tuck them up there so they're out of the way. I just left that primer line right on there. Just unhooked it from the carb. So these, just take out these two bolts that bolt it to the actual intake manifold. So now we're just left with our fuel line and our throttle linkage. So there's those two bolts out. So this fuel line, so there's still going to be some fuel that comes out of this. It's not going to be a lot because I've got it pinched, but there is still going to be some, right? So keep that in mind. Shouldn't be a lot, but sometimes these babies don't want to come off. Like this one. I'm gonna unhook this throttle linkage here. Might make this a little easier. So there's my throttle linkage and spring off. So now this might make my life a little easier to get this line off. Kind of twist it a little bit and pull at the same time. See, there's already gas coming out of that carburetor because I'm twisting it and everything. Like I said, there's gonna be some fuel that comes out, but it's not gonna be a ton, right? Might have to kind of wiggle this a little bit just to get it loosened up here some, so I can get this bugger off. Holy Lord, Lefton. She does not want to come off, I'll tell you. There we go. Just persuade it with a screwdriver a little bit. See, a little bit of fuel, not much, so I have it clamped, right? So here's the carb off this. So basically now what I'm gonna do is strip this all down, take the bowl off it and everything else, and we'll take a look inside and see what's going on. What I'm gonna do actually too is, judging by what the inside of this carburetor looks like, and actually, that gas smells ancient too. So what I'm gonna do while I have this off is I'll take this clamp off with a little jug or a pail or something, and I'll actually let all this fuel drain out of here, because I don't think the fuel that's in there is any good anyways. My guess is it's probably a few years old and fuel doesn't last anymore. So, and then that way, when we go to fire it up after we clean this carb, everything should be good to go, and it should just carry right on. So, all right, let's get this stripped down. So I already drained the majority of the fuel out of this carburetor off camera. All you do is loosen off this bolt on the bottom of the float. Obviously there's a little bit of gas still in there, but yeah, if you loosen that off, like over a pail or whatever, there's still some gas in it. Like I said, I drained the majority, or so I thought anyways, holy jeez. Drained the majority of it out off camera, but look at this. Look at that. So what that is bad fuel and a bunch of other particulate and stuff, because it's probably been sitting too. So I'd say that's our issue. So I definitely will drain that tank now. And you can even see the stuff that was already came out of that too. So this right here, that's all what's inside that carburetor and your jets and everything. So that's why it won't run. It's not going to pull fuel, because that's got everything clogged up. And just wipe that out quick. I'm obviously going to give this a better clean, but float, plastic. Get this float out. You just got to pull this needle out. That little pin, sorry, not needle, pin. Float comes right off with the needle on the bottom of it. As you can see there, there's your needle attached to your float with a little spring. Rubber tip on it, which appears to be in very good shape. If they're wore out, you'll usually notice towards the end, you'll see like an edge or a step from where they sit in this hole right here. That's where it actually allows your fuel. So here's where your fuel line connects. Right here, that comes out of your fuel tank. Fuel comes in here, comes through this hole, and fills the bowl in the carburetor. So it fills it until this float felt like this float sits like that when there's no gas in it. Then it'll fill it up with gas. Float moves up like this, pushes that needle in that hole, and that's what shuts your fuel off. The float actually seating that needle in that seat, that brass seat in there. So if these are wore out, this needle, or it's stuck, like if it's stuck in that hole and your float won't come down, you won't get fuel in your carburetor. And vice versa, if it's wore out or stuck the other way, That's when you have a carburetor that'll overflow with fuel. Your needles wore out, or your seats wore out, or your float stuck one way or the other. So this inside actually doesn't look too bad. But I'm gonna pull this jet out in the center here. All you need is a small flathead screwdriver. Sometimes the ones that I have a specific screwdriver that I actually ground the end down on to make it thinner here, so it'll fit in all these carburetors. So sometimes the ones you get from the store, they won't fit in there, they're too wide. They won't fit down in this hole. So I'll put that in there. Yeah, I just took a regular screwdriver and filed the sides until it was thin enough to fit in all these carburetors that I work on all the time. That's the only thing I use it for. So here's the jet. I don't know if you guys can see that. So there's two small holes there. Two there. Two there. So that stuff that came out of this carburetor from sitting would clog up those holes like nothing, right? Because they're tiny. You guys probably won't be able to see this on camera, but what I normally do is hold it up to the light and see if I can see through those holes, or I'll shine a light through the end and see if I can see through those holes. That way I know if they're clogged or not, which I'll pretty well guarantee you they are, and that's why this thing won't run, because it won't pull fuel through those, because that particulate and stuff that was in that gas. You gotta make sure, I don't know if I can focus in on that or not. See, we can actually see through that hole though, eh? The main hole in the centers. Yeah, it's kind of hard for you guys to see. The main hole in the center is free though. You can see right through it. There you go. That's a little better. You gotta make sure that one's free too. It's a little bigger, so it's easier, but yeah, these small ones, you gotta make sure they're free and clear too, or else this thing won't pull fuel out of the bowl. So this is what I do actually most of the time. I did a majority of this off camera, but what I'll actually physically do, I have various different sizes pins and stuff like that. This is actually a safety pin, but I'll actually physically run that safety pin through these holes to make sure that they're actually free and clear. And then I'll clean this all after I make sure that the actual like hard scale and stuff is out of those holes and off of this jet. And same with the rest of this carburetor. I'll actually physically soak it in carb cleaner afterwards just to make sure. Because then anything I didn't get, that'll soften it up, and then I can actually wipe it out. Or so you can see through those holes now. There you go. Yeah, I'll soak everything in carb cleaner, and then that kind of softens everything up. Then I'll wipe it all out, actually blow them out with compressed air usually afterwards too. Nothing crazy, not like, you know, 100 psi or anything, just a light blowout with compressed air. Should be good to go. A lot of guys will overlook this when they do these carbs or try to clean them or whatever, but this bolt that we took out of the bottom of the float bowl, it's actually a jet too. So a lot of guys just think, oh yeah, this just holds the float bowl on with the gasket and stuff. It does, but it's a jet also. You have to make sure that these holes are clean through the sides here. These horizontal holes. And then there's a vertical hole too, because they're all connected. Pulls fuel through the sides and comes up through the center. So you got to make sure you clean this out too. It's got to be free and clear. Pull this gasket back some. Yeah, see these holes on the side too. Yeah, right there. See all the particulate and stuff that's on that old gas and stuff? All that's got to be clean. Get stuck in those holes and then your jets, it won't be any better than it is right now. So you can't forget this part too. It is a bolt to hold the float bowl on, but it's a jet also, so you got to clean this too. All right, so I've soaked this whole carburetor and carb cleaner, scrubbed it, cleaned it all down, cleaned out all the holes with pins and whatever else, made sure every orifice is clean, free of debris, and whatever else. So now we can physically put this back together. Oh, I blew it out with compressed air too, I always do that, but let's put this jet back in. Now these just always, they go right till seated, so like I didn't count this when I took it out or anything, they just go right till seated, so it doesn't have to be in a certain amount of turns or anything. And you don't have to crank them right till they snap either. It's brass and aluminum, so they don't need to be like super tight just till they're seated, right? So put this float back in. Put this needle on this float. The needle on the float. Drop the needle in the seat. Sorry. Oh, I dropped it right out because I couldn't see it on camera. Alright. Put the needle on the float. Put the needle in the seat on the float. Run this pin back through. Everything's good to go. Put our bowl back on. Like I said, this can be applied to pretty much any internal combustion engine. I mean, you're not going to get a more simple carburetor than this is, so this is pretty simple. Like, obviously, if you took apart an ATV or a dirt bike carburetor, it's a lot more complicated than this, but the gasket's kind of corner kind of come off it. But anyways, yeah, that's the simple basics of pretty much any yard equipment: lawnmowers, snow blowers, weed eaters, chainsaws, generators, pressure washers. You can apply these same simple basic diagnostics and tips and stuff, all of that pertains to all that equipment. So I'm just going to drain this fuel, and I'm doing this into a water bottle here so you guys can see what it looks like. I'm assuming this is where our issues came from. Actually doesn't look that bad, really. Wow. Yeah, on second thought, it doesn't look that good either. That's what I assumed to begin with. It just had old crappy gas in it because it smelled terrible. So this is the fuel that was in it. I mean, doesn't look that bad, but doesn't look that good either. It's an odd color. It's got an awful smell to it, like it smells terrible. Just like it's old and varnishy. A lot of guys will make that mistake, right? You got old gas in something and it won't run properly or it won't start at all, and they're like, oh, I'll just put new gas in it, mix it with the old stuff. Well, like, the damage is already done. This is already all in your carburetor and it's got everything already all clogged up. Like, putting new gas in it at that point, you're not doing anything. It's not fixing nothing, right? You actually physically have to take the carburetor off it at that point and clean it and get all that scale and debris and varnish and everything out of the actual carburetor before it'll run properly. Putting new gas in it's not going to change nothing. So I've drained out all the old fuel. As best I could anyways. There's like basically nothing in there. I actually took this and tipped it up on its side and rocked it back and forth to make sure that I got everything out as best I could. She's pretty well dry in there. A little bit left in the bottom, but that's almost nothing. First thing you're going to want to do, you put this back on, is hook up your throttle linkage, because I haven't seen pretty much any piece of yard equipment or small engine that you don't have to tilt your carb on like a 45-degree angle or 90 degrees to get this throttle linkage to hook back on without bending it and stuff. You don't want to bend it because then it'll never work right. So first things first, we'll hook this throttle linkage on here. There we go. Get the spring back on. Because any of this other stuff, like you can manipulate this fuel line and everything. That's not a big deal. But these throttle linkages, if you don't get them hooked up, then you try to put them on afterwards and you bend them and stuff, it's not a good scene. Get this spring in here. Oh, it wants to twist on me. There we go. See, now we can do whatever we want. We can move this fuel line and stuff. It's not a big deal, right? You got to get that throttle linkage on first things first, because once you bolt this carb on, you're not moving it. And you're not going to move that throttle linkage without kinking it or bending it. So carb's bolted back on. So just put this cover back on. Hook this primer line up. It went on a lot easier than it came off. Hook our kill switch back up here, our key. So I'm basically just gonna, because still don't know if this is gonna run yet. So what I normally do, I'll just put this stuff back on, just hand tight, and do a test first. Because I can run it with these covers off, it's not gonna hurt nothing. Put some fresh gas in this thing. I don't put too much in right off the hop, because if something's wrong with that float, or I gotta pull this carb apart again, I'm just gonna be spilling fuel all over the floor that's brand new. So snap this choke back on, because we'll probably need that. That's run, that's choke. So let's see. I can hear that primer working. I don't know if you guys can, so that's a good sign. Primer a little too much, she's leaking fuel. She's working really good. All right, so everything's on. We got that on choke, so let's see if, oh, put this fuel cap back on. So let's see if it'll run now. Sounds pretty good. I'd say that's all right. So that's our issue. Basically all that was, which we found out by a few simple steps of checking a few things and diagnosing it, that it had bad fuel in it and just needed the carburetor cleaned and fresh fuel. So there it is. I'm obviously going to run this a little bit more before I tell this guy that it's good to go and everything. And well, I'm going to look it over too, because I told him that he's never heard it run or anything. He got it from another guy and he didn't even know if it ran or not. So anyways, I'll look it over and make sure everything's obviously working all right. Auger and all that stuff, and the drive and everything, make sure it's good. But as far as running, I mean, geez, you're not going to get much better than that. Fired right up. Whatever that was, 1 or 2 pulls or something. That's pretty good.